Welcome to Psychology 1, and we're going to look at states of consciousness, Part 2. In Part 1, we explored sleep as a necessary and involuntary altered state. This week, we're going to look at a few voluntary forms of altered states. We're going to start with meditation, which involves concentration, hypnosis, which involves suggestion, and psychoactive drugs, which involve choice. So let's begin. We'll start with hypnosis. Now, hypnosis is an altered state of consciousness where people are highly suggestible and appear to be in a trance. Historically, let's look at the name hypnosis. It's a term derived from the Greek word sleep. Okay? Now, it begins, or at least it began, with Franz Mesmer. And the term that came out of that period with this guy in the 18th century was mesmerize. Mesmer proposed that the universe is connected by forms of magnetism. Although much of his work missed the mark, he did have more success with many people with minor issues, and it is thought that these results were perhaps more the result of the placebo effect. Remember that from Chapter 1. Rather than magnetism. Today, hypnosis is popular in nightclubs. It's also used as an anesthetic in dentistry and childbirth and surgeries. Psychologists use it to help people reduce anxiety and overcome fears. Also to help people deal with pain and stress, to enhance the functioning of the immune system and encourage weight loss, and sometimes to prompt memories of witnesses. Now, I watched a dentist use hypnosis on a patient for anesthesia. The dentist hypnotized the patient and gave a post-hypnotic suggestion that the clothespin that would be attached to the patient's ear would minimize pain. It appeared to be effective. The patient reported no problem. Explaining hypnosis, well, hypnosis is not sleep. Though it has been called a hypnotic trance, not everybody is likely or is equally likely to be hypnotized. There are characteristics that people who are readily hypnotizable, and we'll call it hypnotic suggestibility. Now, suggestibility or prone to fantasy, they compartmentalize unwanted memories and they cooperate with the hypnotist. It's extremely unlikely that someone would be hypnotized against his or her will. According to Freud, hypnotized adults permit themselves to return to a childish mode of responding that emphasize fantasy and impulses rather than fact and logic. Hypnotism has a mixed background and mixed present day as to how effective it is. There's still an awful lot of work that needs to be done to determine what is hypnotism and how legitimate is hypnotism. Role theory, as a way of describing hypnotism, people allow themselves to enact this role under the hypnotist's direction. They're familiar with the role of what it is to be hypnotized and go along. Now remember, one of the things that's important here is that people who are hypnotized won't do something they wouldn't do when they were consciously aware. You can't make somebody murder somebody if they weren't already predisposed to do so. Another theory on hypnotism is the social cognitive theory, where behaviors are seen while hypnotized can be easily replicated when people are asked to behave as though they were hypnotized. People are allowing themselves to enact the role. And so it puts some question to how much of a trance are we in as a hypnotized? And again, it really emphasizes the importance of suggestibility, and not everybody can be hypnotized. Let's move on to meditation. Now, meditation is the practice of focusing attention either on an object, a word, or even your breathing. Not all meditations are sitting or lying down. There are walking and other moving techniques for meditation as well. The aim is to block out all distractions to attain an alternate state of consciousness. Now, this can refer to the process in which people seem to suspend problem solving, planning, worries, and awarenesses of the day, allowing things just to pass through consciousness, not thinking about or allowing things to stay. You may have heard the term transcendental meditation, TM. It's been around for some time. I can remember that term being bandied about in the 70s even, I think, and I can't remember if it was the 70s, 60s, or the 80s. At any rate, it's a simplified form of a Far Eastern meditation, and it's characterized by repeating and concentrating on mantras. Mantras are words or sounds that aid the person in achieving an altered state of consciousness. Now, TM has some goals that can't be assessed scientifically, expanding consciousness being one of the more notable ones. TM has shown to reduce one's heart rate, respiration rates, and blood pressure, even reducing some PTSD symptoms. Now, related to meditation is what's known as mindfulness meditation, or MM. It makes no pretense of achieving spiritual goals, but instead, it provides clients with techniques that they can use to focus on the present moment rather than to ruminate about problems. It helps people cope with depression or reduce stresses. Brain imaging shows that meditation activities, the neural structures involved in attention and in control of the autonomic nervous system, helping produce feelings of relaxation. Now, the third group we'll look at is altered consciousness through drugs. Now, drug use is a fairly common and can take us up or down emotionally and behaviorally. Some of the drugs are legal, some are illegal. Some are used recreationally, others are used for medicinal purposes. The alterations of consciousness by some drugs can affect many other areas in our life. That can include education, learning, increased risk-taking, and a variety of more specific outcomes based on which illegal or legal drug one took. There are some important terms to better understand some of the issues users and abusers may experience. So let's go through some of these terms. Substance abuse, dependence. We'll look at substance abuse, which is the repeated use of a substance despite the fact that it is causing or compounding social, occupational, psychological, or physical problems. So it's important to know that's not just use. This is interfering with some element of life. This is not an everyday or all the time. However, this term and many others are variable from person to person. When aspects of one's life is affected, missed meetings, missed deadlines, messing up relationships that could be affected, this is when it gets into abuse. Now, dependence, it's a more severe than abuse. It's often characterized by a loss of control with use, tolerance, and psychological and physiological withdrawal symptoms, or both. So we're going to look at each of these individually. Tolerance, that's the body's habituation to a substance so that higher doses are required to achieve similar effect. So with tolerance, it's often where if you are an alcoholic, you may have started on, say, drinking 3 to 4 drinks a day, but after a while that just didn't give you the same effect. So you went to 6 to 7, and then you went to 9 to 10. That's the effect of tolerance. The physiological dependence, physical or biological need or urge to engage in some form of behavior, withdrawal symptom may include anxiety, tremors, restlessness, weakness, rapid pulse, and high blood pressure. The one that has the biggest impact, I think, on many people who might be recovering from abuses is the psychological dependence. This involves the emotional need or urge to engage in some form of the behavior. For example, depressive or anxious mood. Now, most often notice when one has stopped the drug use, old haunts, maybe the old bar you used to always go to, friends that you used to drink with, all can be prompts and invites to use again. Now, withdrawal symptoms, this is the term that refers to when one stops the use of drugs and then they may experience physical emotional symptoms of stopping that use. This can include tremors, increased heart rate and blood pressure, not to mention some of the psychological dependencies that will interfere with our thinking about those sorts of areas. Now, the DTs, or the delirium tremens, these are experienced by chronic alcoholics when they suddenly lower their intake of alcohol. The symptoms of the DTs is heavy sweating, restlessness, general disorientation, terrifying hallucinations. The DTs are physiological. You will feel them in your body. Now, there are causal factors or causal factors in substance use and disorders, and the classification tool used by psychiatrists and other diagnosticians is the DSM-5. This is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and it's used in making diagnoses of a psychological disorder. So, considering the substance abuse disorder, and that is a psychological disorder, as being on a continuum scale. So rather than it being one block thing, it's on a continuum from mild to severe. The more severe are often conditions that started in adolescence and grew into an adult version. Now, some common answers as to why young people experiment with drugs: curiosity, conformity to peer pressure, parental use, rebelliousness, escape from boredom, pressure, and seeking the excitement or the pleasure. Now, some of the theories of substance abuse, when we start with social cognitive theory, it suggests that people may use drugs at the suggestion or observation of others. Use of substances may be reinforced by friends or by the drug's positive effect on mood. Therefore, social cognitive theory looks at what social affects our thinking about a drug or substance effect or outcome. Now, the biological perspective, or the more genetic predispositions, here the reason for us or for the use may be a result of predisposition for physiological dependence. In other words, an inherited trait or genetic disposition. Now we're going to look at different categories of psychoactive drugs and the effects. Psychoactive drugs are any substance that alters mood, perception, or thought. And we're going to begin with the first group, and that is depressants. They're also known as downers. Generally, act by slowing the activity of the central nervous system, slows things down. So one of the first ones we'll look at is alcohol. For many of us, alcohol is a part of our lives, whether it's part of a celebration, achievement, or just as a relaxant. However, for far too many people, alcohol can be a big problem. Alcohol is considered to be a depressant, provides relief from anxiety, depression, or loneliness, and lowers inhibitions. Alcohol is the most abused drug. With its abuse comes many effects: lower productivity, loss of employment, negative impact on our status. Now, in the younger periods of our life, binge drinking is expressed as males having 5 or more drinks in a row. For females, it's 4 drinks in a row, and it's connected with aggressive behavior, poor grades, sexual promiscuity, and accidents. So, what are the effects of alcohol? Well, clearly, the low doses of alcohol may feel stimulating, but large doses have clear sedative effects. impairs cognitive functioning, slurs speech, reduces motor coordinations, lowers inhibitions, linked to poor grades in adolescence, induces feelings of elation and euphoria that may wash away doubts. Regular drinking leads to physiological dependence. Men are more than women will likely become alcoholics. Now, one of the explanations for that reason is cultural. The cultural explanation really sort of suggests there are tighter constraints on women regarding drinking. The biological explanation is alcohol hits women harder. Now, these explanations could change over time. As culture is not stable, it changes over time. The next depressant we'll look at is opiates. Opioids are similar in structure to opium, but they're synthetically derived, that is, they're man-made. The major application of opiates is for the relief of pain. There are risks with opiates as they complement the neurotransmitters in our brain. However, over time, our brain can stop producing the pain-relieving neurotransmitters, which can produce a physiological dependency, that if our brain stops producing, it's going to want more of the opium to replace what it's missing. Heroin is one of the most addictive opioids. It can cause strong euphoric rushes, can cause drowsiness, stupor, alter perceptions of time, and impair judgment. Now, oftentimes withdrawal can be distressing and include flu-like symptoms, tremors, cramps, chills alternating with sweating, rapid pulse, high blood pressure, insomnia, vomiting, and diarrhea. Sounds wonderful. Methadone is a slower acting than heroin and is used to treat opioid addictions. Now, another depressant is barbiturates. These are depressants which provide relief from anxiety and tension, relief from pain, treatment of epilepsy and high blood pressure, and insomnia. But it too can rapidly lead to both physiological and psychological dependencies. Barbiturates produce relaxing and mild euphoria states. High doses result in drowsiness and motor impairment, slurred speech, irritability, and poor judgment. Withdrawal can be severe and can include convulsions and even death. Now, the second group we'll look at are stimulants. And these are often known as uppers, and they increase the activity in the central nervous system. And we'll start with the first grouping of uppers or stimulants, and that is amphetamines. Amphetamines help people remain alert through the night, often abused because of the euphoric rush that they provide. Ritalin, as a good example, is a stimulant used to treat attention deficit disorder. I used it myself for many years when I was diagnosed with ADD when I was 42. The effect was useful to get focused. It was hyper-focusing, which I didn't do very well, but I forgot to eat for 3 days. It wasn't the most effective medication for me. It might work better for other people. It might have been that I was diagnosed so late in my life. The Ritalin has been shown to increase attention span, which I felt it did, decrease aggressive and disruptive behaviors, probably, and can lead to academic gains. The hyperactivity that is associated with some may be connected to the immaturity of the cerebral cortex, that as one gets older, some of that hyperactivity may diminish. High doses of amphetamines may cause restlessness, insomnia, loss of appetite, hallucinations, paranoid delusions, and irritability. Another stimulant, cocaine. Now, what's interesting, cocaine, as a side note, Coca-Cola stopped putting cocaine in their Coke formula in 1906. You used to be able to buy Coca-Cola with cocaine in it. Can you imagine? Cocaine is a stimulant that produces euphoria, reduces hunger, deadens pain, and bolsters self-confidence. Apparently works by binding to sites on sending neurons that normally reuptake molecules to the neurotransmitter norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin. It stimulates sudden rise in blood pressure. Doses can lead to restlessness, insomnia, tremors, headaches, convulsions, and nausea, hallucinations, and delusions. For those of you who are familiar with the use of crack, the use of crack has been connected with strokes. So we're going to move into nicotine. Nicotine also stimulates. It's a stimulant. It stimulates discharge of the hormone adrenaline and other neurotransmitters. It also seems to help people relax and reduce stress. Nicotine depresses appetite and raises the metabolic rate. Some use nicotine as to help control weight. Nicotine is addictive, and it's what causes the physiological dependence people who have been smoking tobacco products. Now, withdrawal symptoms include nervousness, drowsiness, loss of energy, headaches, irregular bowel movements, lightheadedness, insomnia, dizziness, cramp, palpitations, tremors, and sweating. Now, you're not only affected by direct intake of nicotine, but there's also secondhand smoke. And this is the smoke that's inhaled by other people's tobacco products, and it's also of some concern. It's been connected to lung cancer in people who are not smokers, respiratory illness, asthma, and other health problems. Hallucinogens produce hallucinations. They also produce relaxation, euphoria, and in some cases even panic. Now, marijuana is produced from cannabis sativa plant. It helps some people relax and can elevate mood. It sometimes produces mild hallucinations. The main ingredient is THC. Now, the product, marijuana and THC, impairs perceptual motor coordination and short-term memory and slows learning. It also seems seen as a disturbance for anxiety, confusion, and psychotic reactions. Some people report a sharpening of perceptions, an increased self-insight, creative thinking, and increased empathy. There are strong intoxication can produce nausea and vomiting. People can become psychologically dependent and experience tolerance and withdrawal symptoms. LSD and other hallucinogens. LSD is abbreviated for lysergic acid dithiamide. LSD provides vivid and colorful hallucinations. There's also what's known as flashbacks. And this is the distorted perceptions or hallucinations that mimic an LSD trip, technically termed hallucinogen persistent perception disorder, or HPPD. Now, there are two other examples we can just touch on quickly that are hallucinogenic, and mescaline is one, and it's derived from the cactus peyote. And, phencyclidine, or PCP, was developed to be an anesthetic, an animal tranquilizer. Now, hallucinogens are prone to lead to tolerance and psychological dependence, not so much the physiological dependence. Now, that's a completion of part 2 for states of consciousness, where we looked at essentially the states of consciousness that we could choose voluntarily to affect. Okay, so that completes the chapter on consciousness. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoy the video that I posted that looks at this issue of consciousness in your journal 3, I believe. All right, everybody. Carry on the good fight. Bye now.